Hey guys, today I want to talk about one of the most versatile devices in the automotive wiring world, and that is a relay, a 12-volt relay. A lot of people don't quite understand how they work. They think there's some voodoo involved, or maybe even worse, they think they know how to wire for one or how to set one up, but they don't actually get it right and they cause a problem. Outside of wiring and a switch, the relay is probably the most important device you'll put your hands on. Every vehicle in the last easily 30 years has relays in it somewhere. You kind of have to have them if you're talking about fuel injection. And even on a hot rod that's, been retroed, maybe still has a carburetor on it, but it might have an electric fan, and a relay would be involved with that. So today we're going to go over some of the basics, some of the main, most often used ones, and hopefully get a better understanding of what's going on. So first off, I'll go through some of these examples. This is it's referred to as a 280 micro, ISO 280 micro relay. A lot of times we'll just call them a micro relay. This one's actually from a GM application. You can see where it's got GM on it there. And they have 5 pins, 5 terminals. We're going to come back to that. But if someone says a 5 pin relay or 5 terminal relay, it's going to be just that. It's going to have 5 terminals. Here's a smaller version, but it still falls into the ISO 280 micro. You notice it only has 4 terminals. We will dive into that in a second. But 4 pin, 5 pin. Here's another style of 4 pin. If you notice, it actually has a 5th pin there, some copper. It's just not actually coming out from the manufacturer. They just don't extend it. This is more of it's an ISO relay, but it's more of a mini relay. I sometimes call them Bosch relays. A lot of people call them Bosch relays because they maybe Bosch developed them, maybe Bosch made them popular. I'm not sure, but going back into the 70s, I believe is when these were starting to get popular. As you can see, this is a 4 pin. There are 5 pin versions of them that has a pin in the center, and different from a relay, slightly different, but same principle. You have a solenoid. And I'll touch on a solenoid a little bit and what it does here in a second. But the term solenoid and the term relay basically apply to the same principle, but sometimes the application can be a little different. As you can see here, it's bigger. But let's concentrate on one thing for a second. Let's just concentrate on this 4 pin relay. I'll show you some numbers on this one because it's easier to see. This is a 5 pin, but if you can see there, you got 87, 86, 87A, 85, and 30. So basically every relay that you'll deal with in the automotive world will have 86, 85, 87, and 30. 87A is I guess you could say the difference between a 4 pin and a 5 pin. 87A is not always there. If it's 5 pin, it is. So the basic idea behind a relay is it's a it's a way of activating a higher amperage circuit using a low amperage switch. And I'm going to draw it out. It might be a little crude, but I think it'll get the point across. So say you have a simple switch, and we all probably recognize this diagram right there. Think of this as a toggle switch. When this folds down here, you get connection from here to here. Like I said, a basic toggle switch, a push button switch. When the connection's made, it's gonna pass voltage and eventually amperage from this point to that point. So what a relay does is it goes one step further, and I'll simplify it. But basically, you have a copper coil, and you got a lead on one side of it and a lead on the other. And when you apply voltage, say positive and negative, this electromagnet coil winding, it becomes an electromagnet, and it pulls this down, and it makes the switch contact from, let's just say, point A to B. And this is where the low voltage part of it comes into. You can apply a very small, let's put this in red. You can apply a small draw positive feed into this side of the coil and a very small negative connection here. And it can be 20 gauge wire, it can be 22 gauge wire, it can be very tiny. It takes very little amperage to activate that coil, to make it lock down. But where that's convenient is, say you have large amperage coming in, say you have 40 amps for a fan, or a large fuel pump, something like that. It's going to go on through this way to the second connection. Let me label these. That'll be the next step. So the way I do it, there is some versatility here, but the way I like to always remember it is 30, number 30 is always your feed in. And there's a reason for that I'll touch on in a second. 87 is always your output. So your large amperage will feed into 30, it'll go out 87. The coil is a little, maybe even more flexible in how you connect it. You can actually reverse these connections and the coil's still going to energize. It doesn't matter if you put in positive here, negative here, it's going to energize. Me personally, and a lot of the times the OEMs, I'll see them use the same pin layout. I put 86, number 86 is the negative, and I'll put number 85, pin number 85, as the coil positive. That's the way I like to do it. If you swap these and made positive, negative, reverse, that relay's still going to work. The in and out, the number 30 and the number 87, are not exactly the same. See if I can fit this in the diagram. This would be called your normally open layout. Normally with no voltage here, this is going to be open. There's not going to be any power going from A to B. But that fifth terminal, which is 87A, it's another connection up here, number 87A. So what that means is when you have no voltage applied here, say you take this off, you turn the switch off, you turn the key off, whatever, that connection is being made right there. Point A to C. This 40 amps can go through and contact there. When you put your voltage back, positive and negative, then you'll have the switch close again, and it will no longer go right there. It will then be going across and connect to B. That's a little crude. I just wanted to kind of draw it out and talk about it. Now we can get on and show you a real example. So in the meantime, I want to slide over here. I already have this written out. I want to keep this up on the screen. 30's feed. 85 is coil plus, 86 is coil negative, 87 out, 87A is naturally closed, and it does connect to 30. I don't want to get too complicated on it. I don't want to give you too much information and confuse you, so let's just show the actual device and hopefully make it make some sense here. So again, this is our 5-pin, 4-pin will be the same. Here's one that's taken apart. You can see it's got the same numbers on it. If I can get the camera to focus there, they're actually labeled upside down from one another, but that doesn't matter. You got 87, 87A, 85, 30 over here, and 86 in this corner. So I've taken the cover off, and you can see this coil. Basically, when you give it power and ground, it makes an electromagnetic magnet of sorts, and it's going to, inside here, move around this little switch. You can see it kind of moving right there. Okay, so let me get some power onto this, and I'll try to make it where it's easy to see. I have a test light here, and I think we all pretty much know how a test light works. I give it some ground power, ground connection, and then I'll give it some 12-volt positive. I have a battery off camera here. That's going to light up. Okay, so we have 12 volts, positive and negative. And let's show you what's going on here. So, as I said, the 86 is a negative and 85 is a positive, at least the way I like to do it. We're looking at these two right here. I'll go ahead and connect the 86 negative. So right here, and then the positive will be 85. And maybe you can hear that clicking. Better yet, let's see if you can see what's going on. So watch that little plunger right there. Well, try it this way. See how that little switch is going back and forth in there? That's going from one contact to the other. So what I'm going to do here is, if I wanted to get power from this terminal to this terminal, that's going to be from 30 to 87. Let's imagine this was a fan right here. We are going to connect power from to 30. We're going to start with this. So 30, and we're going to go out. I'll use a white connector here. We're going to go out to our imaginary fan. So there's nothing else connected right now but 30 to 87. 30 coming in from the battery, and then 87 going out to the device. Okay, so we want to turn our fan on. We obviously got to give both of them ground. We're switching the power to this imaginary fan. We're going to give constant ground to the relay. Again, that's going to be on coil 86, which is up here in this corner. So let's go over it again. We got battery power coming in. It's constantly connected. Hopefully there's a fuse somewhere in line. You got a negative side over here to the coil. You got your feed going out to your imaginary fan, which is our light. So say you have a thermostat switch, or you have a key on switch, or however you want to activate this fan. You give it a small amount of power, a small amperage draw of power, and it's going to turn that fan on. And the load on your little ignition switch or your little thermostat switch is basically nothing. It's less than 1 amp, decimal amounts of amperage that activate this coil and feed power from here to here. Again, a fan, a fuel pump, things that might draw 10, 12, 30, 40 amps. You have different size relays that will accomplish this. But that's the most simple principle I can show you. Now, where it gets maybe gets a little more involved is you can jump from here to here. Say you got a large wire coming into your 30. You can jump over and get both of those. Now maybe you want to use your negative as a switch. You can make a negative switch run on a toggle, a thermostat, whatever. Some fuel pumps can be triggered negative with a negative line. So it's the same principle. As long as I have power to this terminal and power to that terminal, it's going to activate across these. So there's multiple ways you can do it. You can switch a ground, you can switch a positive, etc. So let's look at it with the 87A terminal, the one that is normally closed. So the reason that I usually feed into 30, and again, these are kind of upside down numbers, but you can read on your own relay. So if I'm feeding into 30, and I'm going to give 85, I'm going to give it my positive key on, and then I'm going to make my output 87. As you can see here, my fan is not on, my fuel pump, whatever my device is not powered up. But if I give it ground, there we go, same as I just explained. But here's where it gets interesting. I can go over here to the 87. There's no coil relay triggers. It's passing straight through. This is the normally closed terminals. And if I want to turn it off, I energize the coil, and it's now putting power right here. So you can see maybe sometimes you want something to be on most of the time, but when you flip a switch, you turn it off. There's lots of different ways you can work with this. I mainly just want to get across the idea of the versatility. You can do so many things with a relay to transfer large amperage power from here to here. Like I said, these are an ISO 280. It's the MetroPack 280 terminals, and I've talked about those in other videos, but you can do a myriad of different fuse box holders and fuses that go with these. Quickly on that note, some of these mini fuses, micro fuses, I should say, they're the same size terminal. These fuses and these relays will often be in boxes together. Same line of thinking. The bigger tabs, bigger fuses will go along with some of these bigger relays, usually, not always. Nowadays, I like to wire a lot of my stuff with this size. These relays can be 30, 35 amps. You can get a 35 amp fuse. Some of your terminals are only good for 30 amps, so you have to be careful of that. If you need bigger, you start getting up into a bigger size relay that can, some of these relays can handle 50, 60 amps. Some of them are only made for 30. This one right here, if you see, it says 40 on it. Here's a nice little diagram. This relay showing 30 feeding in, and then it doesn't have an 87A, but 87 would be your output. And then, of course, your coils, doesn't matter, 85, 86, you can swap them. So that's the basics of a relay. The solenoid is the last thing I really want to touch on. They are used in, Ford used them in starter applications a lot. They're used in winch configurations. You can have two of them. They can actually reverse the polarity. There's a lot of things you can do with these. I don't know of a functional or an application difference between a relay and a solenoid. They do virtually the same thing. The solenoid is generally thought of being as a bigger amperage draw. You know, some of these are good for 200 amps across here, maybe more, especially if you're engaged in a starter. You have to read on the details. Some of them are meant for constant duty. In other words, when you activate it, it's all right having amperage draw across it for long periods of time. Others are meant for more of a short-term use, which would be your starter applications, something that you're just activating for a while and letting go. I'll do a quick demonstration to show you that it's the same overall idea. So if we connect our negative here, usually these connect through the frame here. If you got it connected to the chassis or a fender or whatever, you're grounded out right there. And same thing. See this where it says S? That's basically your starter. On this one, it's considered a starter solenoid. So we're going to engage a starter. You can hear that real large plunger in there. It's kind of on an axle right here. It's going up and down. So same idea. We're going to give power into this side, and we're going to give output to our test light or whatever you want to think of it as. This terminal over here is labeled I. That has to do with ignition. Ford, especially, they were wired this way. When you activate this, it keeps power going through here to feed the ignition system while you're cranking over. It's kind of a long story, but if you want to use one of these solenoids, the I doesn't come into play too often for you. The S pretty much will all the time. In this case, you want to kind of always have this grounded. You want this positive. You really can't reverse these because of the housing. So that's the gist of a relay. It's meant to relay power from one side to the other. And that's the best way to think of it, relaying large amperage draw from one side to the other. Same way here with your 30 to 87. And something else I want to show you. So if I'm touching the 87 and the 30 right here, better yet, let's say I'm touching the 86 and the 85. You'll notice if I pull this out and put it in the wrong way, I'm still touching the 87 and 85. They're diagonal for one another. Over here, we have the 30 and the 87. Now, if you're not worried about normally open, normally closed arrangement, you got power in, power out. You swap them. It's still going to just be a connection made and go from there to there. So especially on a 4-pin relay, this is a better way of showing it. If I have connections here and connections here, if I pull it out and put it in the wrong way, it's still going to be coil connections in and out, and you're safe. You're not going to hurt anything or short anything out. On a 5-pin, it obviously becomes more important because you'd be moving that 87A around, and it can be a lot more of a problem if you wire it wrong. I'll show you my down and dirty cheat sheet. I made this years ago. I have a couple of them around the shop. I can glance up at it if I ever forget. I have my 30 as feed, my 87 out, coil negative, coil positive, and then 87A down here. It's, like I said, it's an old piece of paper, but it's on magnets in 2 or 3 places around my shop. I can glance at it. It's kind of a cheat sheet. And the way I did it is I made it looking down onto the relay. So that's going to be my 30 feed. Probably can't see that, but if I'm looking out that way, we got 30 feed, 87's output, coil, and positive. Make yourself a cheat sheet. Don't be afraid to do it. All these relays tend to have the same pattern as far as configuration. There's even little relays such as this. It might be 10 amps. They'll go on computer boards, all different kinds of sizes. But in general, if you got a 5-pin or a 4-pin, it's going to kind of follow that same layout. So anyway, hopefully that didn't make any of you more confused. Hopefully it helps somebody. If you have some questions or if you want to add to the discussion, put a comment below. Thanks for watching.